school with that I knew they wouldn't have been able to do what they were doing in those schools if it wasn't for my mother, the school nurse. So a rich heritage. But when I think about the pediatric piece and Dr. Bumbalo, one of the first experiences that I had working with kids with special needs was at, some of you have heard me talk about School 64, which was a school on the hospital grounds of the big city hospital where I trained. And it was a school for handicapped kids, as we talked about it in those days. And I had this flash of memory. Dr. Bumbalo was the pediatrician for that school and for West Seneca State School, the big state hospital in Buffalo. Carl remembers did some of the first work trying to look at the impact of vitamins and whether or not we were going to cure mental retardation. And I remember when he was doing that study. But anyhow, I remember Dr. Bumbalo and the way he interacted with those kids at School 64, and he was a beautiful model. And I remember the day at School 64 when the principal took me down a peg. I was, I think, a junior year nursing school, doing my rotation there. And a little boy who I'll never forget, his name was Patrick. And Patrick was post-polio. Lots of kids in that school at that point in time who were post-polio kids. And he was paraplegic, and he was on crutches. And School 64 was such that we had to clear out the auditorium for lunch. You know, it was one of those multi-purpose rooms. And so they were doing that to get ready for lunch, and Patrick was going on his crutches across the floor, the gymnasium floor, 100 miles an hour, and went flying. One crutch went that way, one crutch went that way, and he went another way. And Nancy Nurse went running to pick him up. And Miss Olson stood on the stage of that room, and she said, "Nurse, you leave him alone. He can do it himself." And I stopped dead in my tracks. And Patrick got up and gathered up his crutches, crawled and got one, crawled and got the other, got up and went on his way. And that was an incredible lesson. Nurse, you leave him alone. He can do it himself. And then I had another interesting thing happen this week when I was thinking about Patrick. I was listening to my last book on tape, Tim Russert, Big Al and Me, talking about his father. And Evelyn makes fun of me that I identify with Tim Russert. I hope he did good today testifying.
He did.
In the Libby trial, did he?
He did.
Okay. But anyhow, I think what I relate to is his Buffalo roots, his working class Buffalo roots, his knowledge of who he is and where he came from. And that's very real to me when I listen to him. And of course he loves the Buffalo Bills and never fails to say that. And I certainly love the Buffalo Bills. But anyhow, I was listening to the end of his tape this week, and he's talking about a presentation that was given to a university graduating class where he was speaking. And somebody else on the program he heard say, the best exercise for your heart is to lean down and pick somebody up. And that just hit me. And I'm thinking, I've been meditating on that all week. How can you leave him alone, nurse? He can do it himself. And yet lean down and pick somebody up. And I really think that that's the crux of what I've tried to do, is to find the way that you balance both those things with families. And for me, it has been, how can I lean down and pick up moms and dads so that they can help their kids do it for themselves, and that they can learn how to do it for themselves. And it's that exquisite balance between those two things. So please remember that the spirit of SMS always needs to be, remember when to lean down and pick them up and when to let them do it themselves. And if you do that, I know that in the future it will still be a fine organization, no matter what happens in terms of the politics or policy of the times, as long as the people at the level that are working with families still remember that balance, it will be great. Thank you all. You're a wonderful group, and thank you for being my capstone.
How is it to